Now that we've given you some background on network services and the configuration files that manage them, let's talk about how to install network services. We've talked about sysinstall several times during the course, and we're going to talk about it again. Sysinstall basically is a one-stop shopping installer that you can go back and install several more components of BSD Unix, and in this case we can go back and install network services if we like. Now we can install these when the machine is started up or when it's installed, but we can also go back later and configure them if we need to. But sysinstall can help us install network services as well, such as mail, NFS, INETD, and so forth. Once the service is installed, it's usually started automatically through the init service. The init service will call the etc.rc.conf file, and that services has to be listed in there, so it will start automatically. Now you also can control the service manually, provided it's got a keyword listed in rc.d in that directory. Let's go ahead and take a look at how to install a service and then look at rc.conf and make sure that it's running properly. Okay, let's go ahead and look at sysinstall. And we've seen this before, but let's go ahead and take another quick look at it. What we want to do is go ahead and arrow down to configure, and we're going to arrow down to networking, and this is where we can configure additional network services. Now you've seen this before. We actually looked at this when we talked about configuring additional network interfaces. Now we're not looking at configuring a network interface this time, but also notice that we can look at configuring various other services. We can configure anonymous FTP, NFS, NTP, and so forth. There's different things we can configure here. What I want to configure right now, just to show you how it's done, is the INETD. Now we talked about INETD in an earlier session, but we have not actually got it running and configured yet. So let's go ahead and install that. We're going to say yes, we want to enable it. We may want to change the settings or not. I would recommend that you go into your own editor and change them when you like. I would not do it from sysinstall. So let's say no. We're going to use the current settings that's in it, and then we're going to say OK. And we're going to arrow back up, exit, and exit install. Now once this is done, what we may want to do is go ahead and check on the status of INETD in rc.conf. So let's go check there and make sure that INETD is in fact installed, or see if it is, and if it's not, then we should edit the file and add that line in there. So let's go less etc rc.conf and see what we got in there. Now it's not in there. Oh yes it is, it's at the bottom there. I just saw it. It added it to the bottom. So we've now enabled INETD, and so now when init is started, it will read the rc.conf file and start the INETD service. And of course we talked about the fact that INETD runs and configures a lot of other services. So because INETD is enabled, now we're going to start other services as well. So now it's important for us to go in there to the inetd.conf file and figure out which services we actually want to run. Now we've already looked at the inetd.conf file. There's a couple other things I want to show you as well. Starting inetd.conf or starting INETD through rc.conf is an automatic process. Anything that's put into rc.conf will start when the machine starts up. But we also can manage services manually, and that's actually not too hard to do. We change to the rc.d directory and do an ls-al. Let's pipe that into ls. We're going to see that we have a lot of different files in here. These files are keywords for services, and we have a lot of services in here that we could start up. And if you just kind of go through here, you'll see some of the services that are there. And there are a lot of different services in here. And these services can actually be managed just simply by using start, stop, and restart. And if we, just to show you an example of that, we can type in SSHD, which is a secure shell daemon that's running, and we can stop that. We can also restart it as well. Actually, we need an absolute path for that. So what we would do is /etc/rc.d/sshd stop. And so we're going to stop this. We actually can't stop it because it's enabled in rc.conf. We actually need to say one stop to stop it for this one time. So we can change this. It has stopped already actually. We can also restart it by typing in start. And we're not be able to use it. Start and stop primarily are for when you want to manually manage a service that's not managed in rc.conf. One start and one stop are actually the correct commands to do this with. We could also restart it if we wanted to. Let's go ahead and use one start, and now we've started it back up. We could also, if we wanted to, restart the service. If the service is hanging up and it's giving us a problem, we can manually restart it. Well, we have to use one restart once again. So it can be a little complicated. The reason for the confusion is this is a little bit different between Unix distributions and Linux distributions. There are some where start, stop, and restart work just fine, and obviously in BSD Unix, depending upon how it's configured, you have to use one restart, one stop, one start. That's basically how to do this manually. And it's not a very difficult process, but sometimes when you go between Unix distributions or Linux distributions, you may have to remember exactly how it's done. The point of this is that you can manage these services manually as well, in addition to having them in the rc.conf file and starting automatically with the init process.